Hi everyone. In this session, we will discuss about letter of credit. Can anyone tell me what is a letter of credit?
Yes, sir. Letter of credit is a financial instrument commonly used in international trade.
Correct. Let's know more about it. Let's understand LC with an example. Suppose Import Limited in India wants to buy electronic equipment from Export Incorporation USA. In such international trades, risks are also involved. These risks can be segregated based on the buyer and seller. Risks faced by the sellers, risk faced by the buyers. Let's look at the risks faced by the sellers. Risk of payment default by the buyer. A contract is made between buyer and seller. Seller ships the goods. Seller sends the bill of exchange. Buyer defaults on payment. Second example, buyer refuses to take delivery. Let's say a contract is made between buyer and seller. Seller ships the goods. Seller sends the bill of exchange. Buyer refuses to accept the goods. In this situation, the seller has two options. Search for a new buyer in the same country. This is a difficult task because the product may have been customized as per importer's demand. Re-import the goods. Re-importing goods is expensive and may lead to losses. Let's look at the risks faced by the buyers. Goods shipped are not of desired quality. Let's say there is a contract made between buyer and seller. The seller ships the goods. The buyer makes payment. Goods are not of desired quality or as per specifications. No provision for inspection certificate.
Then what is the solution, sir?
In such situations, both the parties should use a letter of credit. A letter of credit (LC) is a written irrevocable undertaking by a commercial bank issued at the request of the buyer, that is the applicant, in favor of seller, that is the beneficiary, to the effect that payment will be made for trade transaction if the beneficiary presents documents strictly as per the terms of the LC. Let's say Import Limited applied for LC to the bank. The bank issued the LC to Export Incorporation. LC is the most secure way of doing international trade. It is a system that has evolved in the course of trade, beneficial for both importer and exporter. In international trade, importer's creditworthiness may not be as good as commercial bank. By issuing LC, the integrity and creditworthiness of the buyer is replaced by that of the LC issuing bank, and at the same time performance of the seller is also ensured. The issuing bank thus replaces the assurance of payment from buyer with its own undertaking to pay against complying presentation of documents irrespective of whether the buyer pays or not. The payment undertaking against LC terms, including timely submission of documents by seller, is undertaken by the bank. Therefore, a letter of credit gives assurance to the seller as well as the buyer. The seller is assured of receiving the payment on time. Let's say there is a contract made between the buyer and the seller. The buyer has applied for an LC. The seller ships the goods. The documents are sent to the bank. Within the specified time as per LC terms, the bank does the payment to the seller. The buyer is assured that the documents are as per the LC terms, and the payment will be made only after examining the documents completely. Let's say again there is a contract between the buyer and seller. The buyer applies for an LC. The seller ships the goods. The documents are sent by the seller to the bank. The bank then checks the documents thoroughly. The payment is made to the seller after checking the documents.